Welcome back to my Thoughtful Thursdays video channel. I am here in First Christian Church here in Peoria, and I am here with Karen. Thank you so much for letting me be here and for being on my channel.
I'm delighted.
I am in the sanctuary. It is absolutely gorgeous in here. I am incredibly jealous of your pipe organ. That is so cool.
I love that. We love our music here, and the organ is a big part of it.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic. It's so amazing. They got stained glass here. It's hard to explain it on the video channel, so you might want to come and check it out just to see what it's like here.
You are welcome.
I was reading just a little bit about you and your church before I came, and I saw that you are a John Denver fan.
Oh,
so
yes.
At least that's what your website says. Favorite
Yes.
John Denver song? Can you do that?
Yes, I can. My favorite John Denver song is probably Annie's song.
Oh, I love
but the
that
reason for that is because of the spiritual experience he had right before he wrote that song.
Yeah.
That I am fascinated with the stories about people who feel that warm glow and that immeasurable sense of love with each other. And he says in his story that he was on a ski lift.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, just everything turned this warm glow, and he felt this overwhelming sense of love, and came back and wrote that song. So it's really more because of, I'm a sentimental person, but not that sentimental.
Yeah.
So Annie's song is wonderful, but it was because of the story that inspired it that really got to me.
That's amazing. Well, good. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that. I love that song. I was really glad that you would pick a song that I knew.
Okay,
I was like hoping you weren't going to be on a B-side somewhere that I didn't know.
Right,
So
right.
we're in the middle of this podcast series, this video series, where we're looking at the affirming churches, and I'm so glad that you guys are, and that we can introduce some of my viewers to this wonderful church.
Good.
But I just want to know, tell me a little bit about you, maybe where you're from, how long have you been here in Peoria, kind of what's your title here at the church?
Okay. I moved here in 1994 following a divorce, and I came here with my 3 children and was delighted. I was born in Wisconsin. My father is a pastor, and he went down to pastor a church. We all, of course, the family went down to pastor a church in the Canal Zone. And so I had this amazing childhood experience of living in a different country. Now, of course, the Canal Zone was American property at the time. We were so involved with mission work in Panama, and just a sense of growing up in the tropics and what that meant, and being able to explore nearby countries and things like that. It really shaped me quite a bit. So from there, my father left after 9.5 years and accepted a church here in Peoria over at Glen Oak Christian Church, which is one of our sister churches.
Okay.
It's another disciple church. And so I actually finished high school here.
Yep.
I went on to Phillips University, which is in Enid, Oklahoma, and I should say was in Enid, Oklahoma. It was one of the smaller schools, a Disciple of Christ school, that ended up not making it.
Yeah.
And so we have a wonderful alumni association, but that's the only connection we have. From there, I went to Lexington to go to seminary. And from there, I went to a small town in Illinois it started a family and pastored there, and then ended up getting called up to First Christian. So I'm actually here for the second time in Peoria.
So because we're talking about affirming churches, all my friends that are a part of this affirming group are like, you've got to go check out First Christian. And they sang your praise, and they talk about how wonderful
very
you are.
nice.
And so I just want to know, what kind of brought you guys in your journey to this space right now?
Okay, well, you used the best word. In 2013, a number of disciple churches, as I think a lot of denominations, were sensing this change, this cultural change that was happening with mainline Christianity. And they were trying to help us find ways of moving through that and being very intentional about that. And so they offered a program called The Journey. And so we became a part of that, and it was a 2-year process. We identified some areas that just seemed to rise to the top where we had to deal with it. One that rose to the top was the idea of becoming open and affirming. It was more about saying out loud what was already happening.
Yeah.
Because we had a number of people who identified with the LGBTQ community already worshiping here, but we recognized, it's not going to be long before we are asked to do a same-gender marriage, as things along that line, and we wanted to be sure, to become an elder of the church, whatever. We wanted to be sure that that did not become a crisis and we wanted to deal with that ahead of time. Our elders started meeting at 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings. We met in small groups, and we talked about this being a discernment process. But we went back to Romans 12:2. Do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, so to be able to discern God's will.
Yeah.
For 11 weeks, we gathered. We began with 5-minute worship, where the symbol of the flame for a spirit, we lit a candle. Yeah. We talked about the fact that the Spirit had entered that room and that we were all needing to connect with that. We were to suspend our own beliefs that we were coming in with in order to truly look at Scripture and listen carefully to each other. After about 11 weeks of doing this, one of our elders said, "We are ready." And she said, could we move on to creating an open and affirming statement? And she volunteered to write that statement. And the rest of us said, we are ready to look at the statement, and then we'll make decisions as we go. She came back with a beautifully written statement. There, we offered that same process to our congregation, knowing that as people might want to join a small group, all of these elders could basically do that with them.
Right.
So we would have plenty of leaders for smaller groups. As it turned out, the congregation was already kind of there.
Yeah.
They listened to what the elders had to say. So there was not much of that happened after the elders made the decision to take it to the board. The board then listened to the process and accepted the statement. It came to the congregation. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of questions at that point. Yeah. This was not a 100% decision. We truly had just a handful of people who were bothered to the point of expression.
Yep.
We may have lost, I don't think, more than a handful of people. And that handful of people chose not to enter any discussion, not to take advantage of small groups that we invited them to. So it was like their mind was made up and they already knew what they thought and they didn't need any more information. But I do want to mention just one thing that happened that I thought was really remarkable. I had an older gentleman who came into my office and sat down and said, "Karen, I just don't think I can do this." He said, I don't believe this is right. I don't believe it is scriptural. He said, "I may end up having to leave the congregation." Wow. I finally said, here's what we know. We all may be at different places on a continuum of how we understand this, and we have different questions that we're still bringing up and that we're talking about. But what we have always said is when we come in to worship together as disciples of Christ through our denomination, we identify the communion table as being a place of reconciliation where we, again, suspend our differences and recognize the humanity of each other. And we come together with God and with each other. Mm-hmm. I said, that is the most important thing. That we gather around the table together. And I said, if there is any chance that you feel like you can continue to be a part of our congregation, just simply being open to different things happening around you, different discussions happening or whatever, and still gather with us at the table. Yeah. I said, that's all we ask from you. And he came back about a week later and he said, "I'm a disciple." He said, "I appreciated what you said about the communion table." He said, "I can do this."
Wow.
And I thought that was a very powerful way of remaining within the fellowship. He came around to just fully embracing the welcoming aspect of this church.
I love that. I just think that you are so courageous to have gone through that and to have talks with people, even if people rejected some of your talks. Yes. I love what you say about you wanted to avoid it being a crisis where you had to make it. You wanted to get out before it. Right. It's one of those, I think you're right, like if you wait to cross that bridge until we get there, you'll find that you might not ever get to the bridge because people won't be there long enough to actually get there.
That's right. Yeah. The very first same-gender wedding that I did may have been right before this process, but it was not in the building. I can do what I need to do outside the building.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But to welcome them fully into this community means, of course, we will celebrate them right here.
Yeah.
And so since then, we have had 2 other same-gender weddings, one of which was in the sanctuary, and fully celebrated.
Yeah, I just think you are so cool. That's amazing.
Oh, that's
yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
I love it. Can you tell me a little bit about your church service right here, your church, your local congregation? I know that you guys are disciples of Christ, and I want to know, like, what does that mean? You've used the term mainline, and I'm just not certain that everybody who's watching this understands the difference. What kind of makes you guys distinctly you?
Well, like you said, we are just Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We are one of the first denominations that came through on American soil. So we date back to the early 19th century. We came out of the Second Great Awakening. Second Great Awakening came through some of the camp meetings where people gathered on the frontier, and one of the biggest ones was at Cane Ridge, the Cane Ridge Revival, and pastors came from everywhere. They were preaching on tree stumps. People left the revival, which lasted a week. This was in Kentucky, and just spread out. And wherever they went, they would begin to form small churches that would then grow in their own communities. So we came out of that background. The idea was of going back, restoring. We were the Restoration Movement, restoring the New Testament church, where disciples just gathered for worship and fellowship and service and discipleship to learn from each other. Our church here was formed in 1845.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it is. So last year we celebrated our 175th anniversary. But in terms of what our worship service looks like, I think for all disciple churches and and specifically for this church, music is really important. We have a strong history of hymnology and of creating our own hymn books. A lot of our theology coming through those hymns. So we sing a lot in worship. We have a choir. We have a bell choir. We have a ukulele group that comes out occasionally.
Oh, that's fun.
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We have a tuba ensemble that will get together occasionally. So music is really important, but our organ has been a part of our worship just ever since.
Yep.
The disciples identify that the pinnacle of our service is sharing communion together. The sermon is an important part, the discourse of that, of sharing that kind of information, of basing it on Scripture. Very important, but it is the communion service that is the peak of our service. So that's pretty much what our worship is about.
Kind of a fun question. Just tell me something completely random that maybe even your congregants don't know about you.
Well, okay, close congregants might have picked up on this. I love folk music.
Oh, yeah.
I love bluegrass music.
Yeah.
When I was in college in Oklahoma, I learned banjo.
Oh, wow.
Now, I don't say that very loudly because I haven't kept it up very well, and I don't really want to pull it out and perform.
Yeah.
But on my sabbatical, I fulfilled a lifelong dream of purchasing a hammered dulcimer.
Whoa.
So I have that set up, and I am kind of plucking at it at different times during the day. I am looking forward to learning how to play the hammered dulcimer too.
It's amazing to watch them when they
know
really
it.
get into it.
Yes.
One of my favorite recording artists who now has passed is Rich Mullins, and he would play it a lot.
I did not know he was a hammered dulcimer player.
He was, yeah. So he's got a few songs where it's instead of playing guitar or piano, he would play
That's
hammered.
wonderful.
Yeah. So imagine that there are people that are watching this, because I bet there are now people that maybe didn't even know you guys were here, and they've now watched you, they've fallen in love with you. How would they come and visit because of COVID stuff? What's happening? What times? What dates? Do you have a mid-service, adult classes? What type of things?
Okay. All right. Well, our worship, I'll start with worship. Our worship is at 10:30 in the morning. We are also live streaming, and we will continue to do that. You know, COVID, if we go back to the way we were before COVID, we're in trouble because we have changed so much.
Right.
I think we all have. We actually see ourselves as both having almost 2 campuses, one online
Yep.
and one here now. So you're welcome to either one. If you come here to worship, again at 10:30, you will be greeted at the door by one of our greeters. We'd be delighted to have you. If you come a little early, we'll point you to the coffee pot. You're so welcome to that. We'll be given an order of worship. We have a bulletin. We find that that's a little easier for people, and people can see the whole. They can see the flow of worship when they have the whole thing in front of them, as opposed to just, okay, now what's next? Right now, because of COVID, we are picking up our communion at the table, and it comes double cupped. We have chosen to do it that way, where the top cup has a little bit of bread and the bottom cup has the juice, or vice versa, I guess. We won't have someone touching, the risk of someone touching the plate. So you'll pick that up on your own and come in with that, and sit in the pews. And I think, this is my first Sunday back after being on a 3-month sabbatical, and there have been a few changes as we begin to open up, but I do think that even this Sunday we're doing a little bit of social distancing, and I think the reason for that is because we are beginning to sing again, and we just want to keep people as safe as possible. Even during that time. So we are definitely on the path to opening up completely. And I think the singing might be about the last thing that we're doing behind a mask.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we invite you to come. If you choose to come to our 9 o'clock adult hour, again, the only class that has resumed so far is one that it is a contemporary issues class. And it is something so contemporary that is downloaded on Thursday from our source, and we read through the news topic, and it is very well done. And writers have chosen scripture and discussion questions based on that particular news story. Yeah. And so it's very interesting, and you're so welcome to come to that at 9 o'clock. That gets over at 10. And then again, there's a little bit of coffee time from 10 to 10:30. We have not resumed it yet, but our children's educational time is during worship. They join us for worship up to a point, and then they go off to an educational time. And we have found that works better for families who just don't need to be here for 2.5 hours on a Sunday morning when they're so busy.
Well, thank you so much for having me here in your building and letting us do this. I'm so grateful that my viewers get to see another wonderful church here in Peoria that maybe they didn't know about, that is also open and affirming, that you don't have to sacrifice that part of your beliefs and what you think about and your love of maybe family and friends who are LGBTQ+.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to sacrifice that to go to a church.
That's right. That's right. All are welcome. We say that and we mean that. So we are so welcome anytime.
And for my viewers, thank you for watching. We'll be back next week. We're looking at a Baptist church here in town, which is First Baptist. So I'm excited to be here. And we'll see you back here next week, same time, same place.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.